talk about the VOD and the silver screen. Kevin and Tom and Joe know all there is to know, from masterpieces to deep fried tacos. And if the movie sucks, you might hear them say, there's no telling where the guys will take you. Get ready for a spoiler. Won't say it twice, cause we already warned you. Better watch out, it's gonna ruin the plot. Real spoilers. Real spoilers. Real spoilers.
Broadcasting from a radioactive bunker deep inside the Bracket compound, this is Real Spoilers, an interview. We have a couple of very special guests here today. Before we get into what's coming up, let's talk about what came before. A decade ago, one man had 30 days to try and collect the entire North American NES collection, 678 games, traveling 10,000 miles across the US and Canada. No internet, no financial help from friends or the production. The most epic video game documentary of our generation was born with Nintendo Quest. Now they're doing it again in a 13-episode sequel series, Nintendo 64 Quest, where Jay tries to collect 296 N64 games in 14 days, cutting that time in half. No online purchases. The Kickstarter starts Thursday, August 22nd, where you can own the Blu-ray before the series is out next year. Please welcome to the show the creator and stars of Nintendo 64 Quest, Rob McCallum and Jay Bartlett. Good morning, guys.
Hey, what's going on, buddy?
Good morning. Boy, that first project sounds more and more ridiculous the more I hear people talk about it. 678 Nintendo tapes in 30 days.
Crazy.
You guys need to get a hobby.
One of the reasons that I wanted to have you guys on is because I love that documentary. That was my introduction to you guys. I followed you through the TV series and the YouTube videos and the documentaries, all sorts of stuff that you've done. And so I'm really, really excited to talk to you about this new project. But first of all, I want to ask you, what have you been doing the last 10 years? You guys been up to anything?
Just been sitting on the couch, waiting for fame and fortune to roll in. Turns out it doesn't work that way. You gotta go do stuff for stuff to happen. So we said, hey, we've given it 10 years of doing nothing. Let's go do something. So we did something. And now you get to get a chance to own that something on Blu-ray.
Now, Rob, you're being quite humble. You were on our Pop-Tart movie review podcast with the Jerry Seinfeld thing on Netflix, and we talked about an award-winning documentary called Mr. Dress-Up, which is just phenomenal. My number one question after that is, are we getting a physical release of that ever?
It is in discussions. In fact, the team and I are talking about what would make that physical release like truly special and worthy of cementing in a format that can't be erased with the stroke of a keyboard clack. So yes, it's being explored, and why not? So we certainly have some cool bonus features that we could share, in addition to extended interviews with people that we got to talk to. But just timing and figuring it out, and the best possible release, because sometimes you only get to do that thing once, or once a decade.
Yeah, exactly. Once a decade. You mentioned once a decade. I've got the brand new Nintendo Quest Blu-ray with the limited edition slipcover. I think 2/3 of them have already sold out. I guess it's backwards there. I had to go with the OG art. I'm not saying the other one isn't great, but it's classic.
We see that's technically the OG art. There.
Is it really?
Yeah.
This is the OG art?
When we launched our very first Kickstarter, it wasn't even called Nintendo Quest. It was called the NES Club, and it was Black Box Mario Parody. Of course, we wanted to change the title for this release so that there was a bit of a sync up.
Okay.
And then when we did our second Kickstarter, both of them were successful, but we had kind of grown a following between our initial offering of me pitching the concept on the couch to it's done and we need funds to finish post and legal. That's when we did the kind of flying van through cosmic outer space. So
That's great to know the history of that, because my DVD I have of this from Kickstarter has, I believe, this art here.
That's right, yeah.
And so I didn't realize the other was the original. That's great. So that is a fun little thing. So if you get Vinegar Syndrome has, I think, like 300 of these things left. Very limited. Love this slipcover design.
Yeah, how did that happen, by the way? Because they said, we're going to do a 1,000 copies limited printing of Nintendo Quest, a documentary from 10 years ago. And in a month and a half, it sold over 600 copies.
Yeah.
For a film that's already been released on physical media, mind you, 10 years ago, but like that's insane to me, to be honest.
Well, it's just the everlasting. That's why I said, I mean, I didn't read that off anything. I wrote that, the most epic video game documentary of our time. It really is great. And Jay, I want to ask you about that experience. I mean, 10 years ago, you guys have been busy. You've been doing, I mean, you have Action Figure Adventure. You've got the Jay and Rob Toy Show. You've got all your streaming stuff, documentaries. I mean, you've been keeping real busy. But, I mean, looking back 10 years ago, did you ever think that you would still be chasing down video games?
Yeah. In a word, I mean, it's kind of what we do together. And I'll never forget the day that Rob called me with the idea, the crazy idea to do this and what it was compared to what it turned into. And I was just going to say that original cover. I remember that day showing up at that photo shoot. Rob's like, do this pose like Jim Carrey in this one movie. And then we had one that was like Vince Vaughn from Swingers. And we had all these movies that we liked. We were trying to parody them.
We did 4 movie poster parodies to kind of try to find our key art. As we always try to come up with multiple looks of what it could be. I mean, you need it for marketing, but you also just want to feel it out to see what fits.
Sure. Well, that's funny. It's, you know, it's like your first James Bond, your first SNL cast. My first cover was the flying van. And so I thought to myself ignorantly, oh, well, I've got to have the original. That's the cover. And look at me. I'm learning something straight from the horse's mouth. I think it's
cool. And we had a couple people on social media. I'm not going to name names just in case, but one person in particular posted about collecting all the different variants of all Nintendo.
You can't, Ben
Quest.
Affleck. You can say it.
And I was like, wow, like I never thought in a million years that would be a thing, you know? I mean, I think I have the original release and maybe one other, but it's just really cool that collecting the different versions, and Rob is very good at that, at putting out, you know, anniversary editions.
Well, we're collectors, right?
Kind of
like
stuff.
These are the things we chase down, and like we're like super fortunate enough to have like a product of our own, and seemingly people that care, that want to own it. If we can give them a compelling reason to own it, I mean, it's no different when we want to buy collector stuff. Like, is this just a repaint? Is this just special packaging, or is there something unique to it? So, try to do our best.
Obviously, the idea has stood the test of time. You're talking about a documentary, like you mentioned, 10 years ago, but you've also released the Power Tour. You've released the real Nintendo Quest. You've released...
some of it. I mean, some of the real Nintendo Quest. It takes forever to do. But
you clearly had such a good idea. I mean, honestly, that it's not only stood the test of time, but you've been able to re-release it, cut it up, put it in different things, and people are still watching it. I mean, why do you think that is? I mean, you've traveled to conventions, you've talked to fans. Why do you think this idea took off like it did?
I think people like going on an adventure. Not everybody has the means to go out there, to meet new people, to do something fun. I think one of the things that draws both Jay and I to the concept is that it's like playing a game in itself, much like the games we're hunting down. It's who are you going to find, what's going to be behind those doors, who's going to be your ally, who's going to be your foe. And I know I live for the moments that you can't write. You know, like those moments where you can't predict that's going to happen, and all of a sudden there's just like this fun curveball that is both exciting and intense, and it's like, okay, now what are we gonna do? And fortunately, I get to sit behind the camera and make Jay sweat and grill him for, okay, what option are you taking, hero boy? Are you going this way or that way? And when he picks, I tell him he's wrong. He's got to go the other way, and then we kind of have that moral conundrum chat back and forth. And I think people just really like that kinship too, that friendship that only comes from working with somebody, but hanging out and playing with someone for 30, almost 40 years now at this point. It's unique, and I think a lot of people don't have that in their life, so here's a chance for them to kind of be a participant. And we're not gatekeepers. We never have been.
Well, we followed your journey over the past decade, too, since that first documentary, Jay, and you can tell the confidence, the negotiation skills, you know, leading into Action Figure Adventure and all the other projects you've worked on. I mean, how do you feel the documentary has helped you and changed your life?
No pressure. No pressure.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now with my life without Nintendo Quest. There's no doubt. At least it would look very different. So the negotiating stuff, to be quite honest, is something I'm never comfortable with. It's just not my personality, which, you know, to echo something Rob would say, I think that's what makes it interesting, is because I'm not the wheeler and dealer guy. You can see in almost every interaction that I'm very uncomfortable. And I think it makes interesting television. It makes an interesting film. It makes it so, the audience can kind of get behind me, kind of root for me. And nothing is staged, man. That's me, right? I don't want to give anything away about this one, but you see a kind of a different side and how Rob and I are kind of different that way. And it's just, I don't know.
But you're doing your own show now. I mean, that, I caught your stream yesterday. Fantastic. You've built a great community. I love that you've got the gameplay streams, you've got the read-alongs and all the different stuff you're doing over there. Do you think that you would be hosting your own show and streaming if it weren't for 10 years ago on Nintendo Quest? Do you think you would have taken that path?
No, I don't think so. I've always wanted to be in front of the camera to some degree. So I really do have to thank Rob for that. And all joking aside, because him and I, we would shoot stuff when we were younger, and it was nothing but laughs. Nothing was serious. So I think Rob really took a chance on us working.
Nothing but laughs.
Rob really took a chance on us working together that it would be professional, and it instantly was, and it still is. So I think that's great. But if I was doing game streaming or creating YouTube videos, I think it would look very different.
It's great that you guys have been able to work together, and you can tell the friendship is there, right? Like, it's different if you were just co-workers, and it's a professional production. Obviously, I mean, Rob's an award-winning filmmaker. Everything looks great with the show, so it's professional, but also you can tell it's real. You can tell the gentle ribbing, the helping each other, being there for each other for support, everything. It's something you cannot manufacture. To Rob's point, I mean, it's the real moments that just present themselves throughout this series and the other ones that you've worked on. Before we move on to N64 Quest, Rob, I keep hearing, and I've heard in the documentary, Rob called me with this idea. I'll always remember when Rob called me. How did you get the idea for a Nintendo Quest? I don't even know where that inception happened.
Well, I had finished a film called Unearthly, which is a bit of a glorified student film. It's a narrative. It's like Indiana Jones meets Jurassic Park. And it was grossly underfunded. I mean, it had like 400 effect shots or something like that, which is a lot more than the 65 and the Hollywood production of Jurassic Park. And I just thought, okay, this was fun. This is great. I was able to pack a theater in our hometown to screen it. But there's got to be a way to do something that's more achievable with a kinder budget and a kinder scope. And I thought, hey, I had done 10 years before that, a short documentary called Fanboys that, of course, featured Jay and myself and one of our other friends as collectors. And there just had to be something to that DNA. What about doing that on a bigger scale, but exploring what Nintendo was? And he's like, well, what would I do? I'm like, I don't know. Why don't you go collect your Nintendo tapes? He goes, well, And then I've been hearing this, like, I would love to have this my whole life. Like, imagine I could go into my room and I had every game there. I could pick any game. And so I just said to him, well, why don't you do it? I dare you to do it, but I can only afford to shoot for 30 days. So then, like, the dare and the game show aspect started to come together. And as we always do, it goes a little too far, and then we reel it back in a little bit. Like, at one point, we were going to force Jay to buy, like, a Nintendo NES console every time he went into a shop 10 years ago. Or he was going to have to get, like, all the hardware and all this. And we talked, okay, boxes, manuals, carts, or just carts. And so you got to reel it in so that there's still a challenge there, but it's still kind of an adventure. And it just started to make sense. And the more that we floated it to other people, including one of our colleagues and collaborators, Jordan Morris, who's kind of like our Obi-Wan. It's kind of our litmus test. Like, Jordan, what do you think about this idea? 30 days, no online purchases, mom and pop shops, going around like you had to back in the day to try to get all the carts. He's like, yeah, that works. Green light. So it's like, okay, yeah, let's do this. And then it just kind of snowballs from there. It's like, what else do we need? Well, let's reach out to people to talk about this. So we have interview segments. Okay, well, let's find some archival footage and let's plan our route. And with that film, you don't know what you don't know. And that ignorance was very bliss. And it's just like, when you realize you're in the mud and the thick of it, it's too late to go back because you've already started down this amazing adventure. So you just figure it out as you go. But it was very much like, how do you want to hang out for a summer, Jay? Wouldn't that be cool if we could hang out for a summer? And we found a way to do it.
Yeah, and I think that the joke line at the end of Nintendo Quest, I think it's still in there, right? It's in there where, what do you want to do next summer or whatever, that's how it ends. Joking, but not really, because we've kept this going for 10 years in all our different projects. But for me, it got me out of my comfort zone where, you know, I live in Ontario and we would go to a couple cities 2 hours in either direction to do various things, concert and such, but that was pretty much it. This was like, man, we were going to Vegas, we're going to LA, we're going to Texas, and it's just like when
St.
I
Louis
started,
even. That's where I am, trading games.
Yes.
yeah, when
too.
I started this, especially when we were touring the film, I didn't want to come back. It was so fun. I mean, my life was in a different place back then, but it was just so fun. So, I mean, that alone was worth the experience.
Yeah, that's awesome. And why is Nintendo special to you, the Nintendo Entertainment System, Jay?
I'm really, really interested in video game history. I mean, what Shigeru Miyamoto did alone, even without Nintendo, you know, is so important to the industry. And what happened with Atari and all the copycat games and how in North America they had to market it as a toy. I just think it's really interesting.
Yeah, that little guy back there.
That's it, yeah. And how to this day, I don't even think this is an argument. I mean, I don't think there's more of a more important system than the Nintendo Entertainment System for what it did, because we really wouldn't have an industry, or it's hard to say what would have happened, but...
Sure. Yeah, I agree. The history is really important to
I don't
me,
know.
too.
I kind of disagree. I think the N64 is the most important video game system. Not that I have an ulterior motive to promote anything
Segue.
new.
Segue.
I think the 64 is the most important.
You think so? Okay. Well, let me ask you this. So the original documentary is so beloved and it turned out great, but you've started transitioning the film documentary into these series. You did it with Action Figure Adventure, and now N64 Quest is going to be a series. What did you learn along the way, and why did you decide to change the format?
There's a few reasons for that. I mean, even when I was editing Nintendo Quest, which is why on my YouTube channel you see the real Nintendo Quest, it felt like it was still a comfortable experience to just go to any given store with Jay and go through that hunting process and let it kind of organically breathe, spend more time with people. And I felt then, and we had a very brief internal meeting, like, hey, what do you think about turning this into a 6-part, 8-part series instead of a feature? And everybody's like, no feature, no feature. It's like, okay, no problem. There's pros and cons to going either way with that. But I just couldn't shake the idea. So when we had a chance to tour the film, I was like, okay, here's a chance to have a built-in travel component where every city you screen the film, maybe we could bundle an episode around that. And Jay was like, well, you're going to film when we go to like these cities, right? I'm like, yeah, I'm going to film. Of course I'm going to film. Why wouldn't I film? And so we came up with the Power Tour concept where Jay's trying to complete a list of 10 games before the end of the summer, and so am I, as we roll out the film, and then we drop in like collector segments from the communities we visit. And that was, again, further proof that, hey, an episodic approach to this stuff can work very well. And the added thing on the show business side of it is a series sells better because it's easier for a platform or a broadcaster to promote it weekly rather than just kind of like a one and done, here it is, go get it, with the same marketing message over and over again. So it's like next time on Nintendo Quest, next time on the Power Tour. So it just kind of organically evolved into something that made sense from a business perspective, but also from an entertainment perspective too.
Cool. And for keen viewers, you may have noticed it went from Nintendo Quest to Nintendo 64 Quest. Now, I know a lot of people for years and years said, what's next, Super Nintendo Quest? And I think there's some pretty obvious reasons to skip over it, but I want to hear from you guys. Was there discussion on going into Super Nintendo Quest, and why'd you ultimately pivot to N64?
Jay, I'll let you tackle this one.
Sure. Rob and I have been talking about this recently. Obviously, these console wars of the early 90s, late 80s is very important. I don't think Super Nintendo on its own can stand as strong as the NES or the 64. If I'm just looking at it from my own experiences, from a historical perspective, and from the actual library of games, I don't think it's as strong. Now, personal experience does mean a lot, because this system we're tackling now means, I would say, more to Rob and I than anything, like in terms of our friends and where we were in our lives. And it was the last great couch co-op system So it's not that we don't like Super Nintendo. I just think there's a place for it, but in a different kind of series.
Yeah, I mean, there's historically, we talk about the impact that Nintendo had with the NES, and then you think about the N64 with the analog stick and all the great 3D platformers. I mean, there are so many reasons, and of course, I want to hear from you guys, but N64 isn't my favorite system, but I do realize there's a lot of great games, and it had a huge impact on the industry.
I just think it's a greater discussion point. You know, the Super Nintendo is an incredible console with some really marquee games, but it's an evolution of what the NES did well and taken to the next level. And as Jay likes to point out, there is a lot of shovelware on the Super Nintendo, especially when it comes to IP for like movies and TV shows that are just maybe not the most lovable experiences. But that 64, man, it's a really important time in gaming where we're transitioning from 2D to 3D. You know, the whole notion of box art is completely changing at the same time. What it means to have a multiplayer game is changing. You know, we're talking about Nintendo's first attempt at commercially releasing an add-on accessory for a console. It's some of the most marquee games that they've ever released in all their franchises. It's more of an interesting thing to discuss regardless of where it lands. And nobody said we were doing any of these things in order, which is always the funny thing. Like, if we would have come out and said the Sega Genesis doing Sega Quest, you know, would people say, well, how come you're not doing Super Nintendo? Or would they have just accepted because we went from 8-bit to 16-bit that it's
Would have
okay?
just accepted it.
You know,
Yeah.
but like the fact that we chose 64, people are like, well, why'd you skip over the Super? Can't you afford to get the library? There's some pricey RPGs in there, buddy. And it's like, that's not it at all. We're doing stuff that means something to us, you know. We could equally do, you know, 3DO Quest or CDI Quest for Jay.
Yeah.
But, you know, unfortunately, it doesn't hold the same place in my heart. So if I'm going to be on the poster, we got to pick something we both love.
There'll be
Jake,
like
that-
two viewers for 3DO Quest. It'll just be Rob and I.
It'd be us two and Trip Hawkins just to see what he likes.
Oh, well, let's do it then. It's worth it.
Okay.
Jay, get out your demo discs.
Yeah.
You got, what did you show? You had is it a missed demo disc on Jaguar?
Oh,
or
yesterday I have.
what was that?
Yeah, that was my hipster show and tell. I have missed demo disc for the Atari Jaguar.
Look out, folks. We're getting hardcore.
That's hipster.
It's deep cut hipster.
What are your memories? I mean, of this great system that you both look back on so fondly. What did you guys used to play together, and what were your favorite games on N64?
I could confidently say we played everything together, even if it was like a single player solo experience. I mean, I would be hard pressed to say anything in like the top 100 games for the 64 we didn't experience at some point together, let alone like hundreds of hours of all the classic multiplayer titles, not only with just us, but our friends as well.
What's your favorite, Rob?
Favorite to play or favorite to like enjoy with friends?
One of each if you got it, but favorite overall too is good.
You know, I really, how can you not like Perfect Dark? There's an ongoing community of hipsters, right? We talk about hipster picks where it's like, is GoldenEye better than Perfect Dark? Is Perfect Dark better? Again, Perfect Dark is, I think, that perfect evolution of GoldenEye. It doesn't have that IP, which really does add a lot of fun flavor. I mean, it got us all back into Bond. You know, TBS was doing like the 24 Days of 007 at the same time. So it was, especially in December like of 97 when that game came out, it was like, wow, you can watch a Bond movie every day, but after school you get to play GoldenEye for 6 hours or whatever it is. And then it was just all encompassing, but it's hard not to love a lot of the racing games too, like Mario Kart and Diddy Kong. I have a real soft spot for multiplayer on Conkers though, man. Teddy's versus Squirrels was a lot of fun, especially when you could have a sword and just chop off a Teddy's head. That was fun.
That's my favorite. I told Jay the other day, but you can see in my background I got Conkers and I have the U2's figures. That's my absolute favorite, Rob. So I have a lot of love for that. How about you, Jay?
Well, I'm looking at those Conker figures now there, buddy.
Yeah. Oh, U2s are cool. And I didn't get it out. I meant to get it out if I have some tubs over here for stuff I don't have up yet. But I have, what is it? There's like an energy drink,
Wow.
G Fuel. Have you heard of G Fuel?
Oh yeah, yeah.
They made a Conker's Bad Fur Day branded G Fuel. It's the Great Mighty Poo. It's corn soda flavored. I've never opened it. Probably never will try it. But, kind of a funny gag flavor. And it comes with the Great Mighty Poo U2's figure in the box. It's something.
I literally picked up a flocked Banjo-Kazooie figure from Premium DNA. It's on sale right now at 40% off from Big Bad Toy Store. It's like an 8-inch figure. They have the flocked version, which I saw in person at PowerCon last year. So for $40, I mean, toys, it's really expensive, but I don't want to pay like, $75 for it. So for $40, yeah, I'll get it. And this thing is gorgeous. So I'm looking forward to getting that. When we're talking about rare merchandise.
How about you, Jay? What were your favorites and where did you find your passion for 64?
There's stages to the life cycle and the friends that were around during then, like the friends kind of changed because some of our really close friends kind of got out of video games. I mean, at first, of course, it was GoldenEye. And we would unlock the multiplayer characters. Baron Samedi, what is that? We would find the early days of the internet, who he was, go down to our local video store, rent the Bond movie he was in, just for that. I mean, that's the power of gaming, right? It got us into all this stuff again. So GoldenEye, Mario Kart, of course. Star Fox, I have fond memories of playing with everybody. We would just switch, hand the controller off. And then later, near the 2000s, of course, it was the THQ wrestling games. We're very, very big. Tony Hawk. We were really into Tony Hawk. And, of course, Perfect Dark, to this day, remains my favorite.
I'm sure you'll be streaming that sequel, right?
Yeah, of course, yeah. I mean, it's a tragedy, the story between Rare and Nintendo, but at least we got Perfect Dark on Switch finally. But Perfect Dark, to me, represents like the climax of the 64. The first documentary that Rob and I ever did was May 2000, him showing up at my door with his camcorder
May 25th
to record us going to EB Games to get Perfect Dark.
Oh, that's awesome.
That's on Rob's channel. You can see that. It's on the Nintendo Quest DVD, right?
No, it's going to probably be an extra on the Nintendo 64 Quest
64,
bonus
there you
stuff.
go.
It makes a small appearance in, I think, episode 1 of Nintendo 64 Quest.
Yeah.
Well, that's cool.
So, I mean,
we were so excited for that, dude. It was the first time and only time I ever consciously skipped school. It was my first year of college. I just forget it. I'm not going to school. I'm getting my Handycam camcorder where you type in the letters on screen, and it's like the perfect documentary. It was so silly, but that's how excited we were.
It was very obvious very early on that our fandom of everything we liked was like, I think that we were just beaming with fandom energy with every single thing that we loved. We loved Kevin Smith movies and the music we loved. And it was like too much for a lot of people, right? And I know that.
A lot. There's a lot of relationships that did not last because of how much we loved things.
Very intense. Not pointing the finger like, if you don't like this, blah blah blah, you're a bad person. But just more like we loved Perfect Dark so much that we would shoot the experience. We didn't know why. I'll go on record as to say in 2000, I don't think there was any pickup videos. There was certainly no YouTube. We didn't know why we were doing it. We just wanted to have that experience immortalized on film. And to this day, when I watch it, it's crazy, man. To see.
I love that. No, I think it's great that you did that. And those moments are things that, that's history. Those moments are lost to time unless someone records them. And I think it's cool you did that. Not to plug another channel too much, but My Retro Life, I think, is the one that I'm sure you guys have seen. But the fact that his dad recorded everything.
It's great.
Tyler's in our series. He's in N64 Quest.
Wonderful. Okay, yeah, he's great. I love those videos. But the fact that his dad recorded all those moments, we would have lost so much to history because no one was going into video game stores or, into the department stores and recording what things looked like. And it is so amazing. It's preserved and he has those memories, and super excited to see him in the series.
Yeah. Great interviewee. Reached out early on and like, hey man, do you want to be a part of this? Because we had been crisscrossing through each other's socials. He reached out when his channel first started he had seen Nintendo Quest. He told me what he was going to start doing. I'm like, yeah, that sounds wicked, man. He's like, what do I do for advice? I'm like, just follow your heart kind of thing. And he did. And he's like exploded, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
He's got such a unique channel again, right? If we all say this, if we could only go back and record, like Rob and I have so many nights with our buddies in that one living room. If we just had a tripod set up, you would think it's stupid back then. Like, why are you shooting us playing Nintendo, right? But now it's like, so he's got something very special there.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about something very special coming up for you guys. Let's talk about this series. I just want to hear a little bit about the production and, what you learned from Nintendo Quest and action figure adventure that translated into the series, and just tell me a little bit about it.
Well, go ahead, Jay. What do you think? Do you want to talk about how we first decided and when we decided and why we decided? Because for the longest time we said we're not doing it. And we would pivot to something like action figures so there wouldn't be any comparisons. We found different ways, and then something changed.
We would spend hours on the phone for like the last 10 years trying to figure out what we wanted to do next. And there was like I'm going to throw out some of the ideas. We had like a Mario doc and some other ideas, but we couldn't really come up with a system that made sense at the time. And Rob said, if and when it comes up, it'll be the right time. So we have passion for music, toys, video games, comics, all that stuff. So we decided to do toys, which was the last thing we did. And I think it was a lot of fun. This one, Rob just called me, I think it was January last year, and said, I think we should do 64. And we talked for a good couple hours. We had a meeting about it, decided all the pros and cons, and ultimately I called him, I think, a week later, and I said, yeah, let's do it.
That's awesome. And how does this journey differ? I mean, as far as where you're going, and I mean, I know it's half the time, and obviously the library, the catalog's half as big, but as far as locations and where you're going, I mean, what's different about this journey?
It's really intense. I mean, when you have half the time to do everything, it's like every second counts. And so instead of 30 straight days, whether Jay goes hunting or not, as was the case with Nintendo Quest, this was, you've got 14 game hunting days. And we're not going to ding you for travel if you want to drive to St. Louis, right? And then go hunting the next day, instead of, drive for 7 hours, get to a store for an hour, and then you torch a day. But if you go hunting or you go see a collector, any potential transaction that you're trying to engage does burn a day. So you really want to pack all that in. And the biggest thing I think that altered how things were different is for Nintendo Quest, Jay was collecting for himself. It was his dream to have that personal collection. For this, he's collecting on behalf of the Alzheimer's Society, which supports those with Alzheimer's and dementia. And because of that, we didn't want to have any rules that would really hurt the outcome of what could help people. So again, if you're going to go game hunting, great, that's a day, but driving to where you got to go isn't a big deal. Same thing with like the budget. In Nintendo Quest, the budget is pretty vague. You can figure it out if you actually listen and pay attention to the prices.
I was trying to the other day. I'm like, what was the budget on some of this stuff?
You can figure it out. Ultimately, it doesn't matter because it's about chasing a dream. And I've screened a cut of Nintendo Quest with the numbers in there, and it becomes more of an adding lesson where people are trying to like add up to see where he is. And I mean, it adds a dimension about the cost of a dream, but then it becomes more of like I'm following along with the math problem. It's like Math Blaster, Nintendo Quest. Like it just isn't as fun of an experience. But with this, Jay has $20,000 that he's set aside, Canadian dollars, which is like 15 American. And it matters because what he puts out, he has to get back. And then the difference goes to the Alzheimer's Society. So economics is a big factor this time around, and it adds to his stress, throughout the whole journey. It's like, okay, what are you worried about? I'm worried about running out of money. I'm actually worried about running out of time. And it flip-flops constantly throughout this mission. And like I said about the hunting days, instead of doing it all at once, we tackled it in 3 phases so that Jay could do 5 days, pivot, do another 4 days, pivot, and then do a final 5. So again, the charity isn't at a disadvantage to the circumstances in the world. Even if we were to limit it to, say, the 10 game stores within a 2-hour radius, knowing that we could take 6 months off and go back and see a refreshed stock that they might have, that only helps the charity in this case, which I think is the most important aspect of this. how far is Jay willing to go to support and help other people? And both him and I have been affected in our families by Alzheimer's and dementia. So it was paramount that we put our best foot forward every step of the way.
I love that. I love the new rules. I love the idea of game hunting days. I think that's really cool. I mean, if you're packing 30 days including travel or half the days not including travel, I mean, you're probably getting just as much time actually doing stuff.
It was about 18 hunting days for Nintendo Quest as it was,
Okay.
because Jay had to do work, the travel that we had there. So it's close to about the same amount of time. It just felt like it was more condensed in a pressure cooker the first time around. I think there was a little bit more breathing, even though every stop was super intense from my side of things.
I'm sure. Well, I love the charity component. So that's something that you guys introduced with Action Figure Adventure. I know that it added to a lot of the tension, and you could tell Jay was concerned. He wants to raise money for charity. It's this great cause. And I remember the auction at the end and the nail biting and, what are these things going to sell for? And it seemed like you learned things from season 1 and season 2. It was a little bit more like, okay, now we know what's going on. We're going to perfect this system. And I'm sure that's only more the case with Nintendo 64 Quest.
What do you think, Jay?
Yeah, definitely. Without giving anything away, there's a lot that happens in this that I didn't even think of in terms of the actual collecting. Few things pop up that are pretty big. You gotta watch the series, but I'm like, wow, I never even thought that this would be an issue. But it comes up, and it is an issue. So,
well, that's awesome.
Is that as vague as I can be? There you go.
Not to try to give too much away or anything, but travel-wise, I mean, are you following a similar route, or how did you plan your path, especially with the shooting days and splitting things up? Like, what was your choice like there?
Yeah, the first time around, it was, okay, how many cities can we hit within a suitable driving time between store hours and still get enough kind of stores in there without burning too much of a day traveling, plus lunch stops and all that, and going to hotels and all the rigmarole that comes into that. This was more like, okay, phase 1, let's go out and hunt. We'll drive far in the morning and then work our way back. Phase 2, let's go on a bit of a road trip. And phase 3, let's see where we need to kind of go based on the results of stuff. So it was kind of like more of, let's just list every possible store that we can go to. Let's get them on board, and we'll just call them when we're 2 hours away, because we got to let the day and the story kind of organically explain itself. And that's kind of what happened. We just kind of rolled with it as we had to. And I think it was the best way to do it, rather than say, we're going to go here, 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 and here, and kind of be landlocked into a route that would, again, put our charitable component maybe at a disadvantage. We hit an amazing store really early on, and we spend a lot of time there at the sacrifice of other stores that we were going to go to, but it wouldn't have made sense to leave the store where you're at, even though it took more time. And that was a decision Jay made. It's his journey. I'll say, are you sure you want to give that up? He's like, well, there's things here that we got to figure out. Like, yeah, but there could be stuff at the other store, but we know what's here, was his argument. It's like, okay, well, let's roll with that. We couldn't have done that if we had to be somewhere by 6 o'clock to check into a hotel, to drive another 3 hours the next morning. So having that organic flexibility was a huge help this time around.
How did you feel, Jay? What compared to the other quests that you've gone on and adventures? What did the scheduling look like, and how did you feel during the process?
It's very tense. It's hard to put into words. I'll try. I mean, we have a loose schedule. You go there. I stay in the production van. I can never go in, obviously, because the reactions are authentic and everything. So I'm sitting there. The crew goes in, sets up. Rob comes out. It's like, okay, you're going to go here, then you go right, then left, or whatever. This time, I felt more like I was in control of where we were going. Where the first time in Nintendo Quest, it was more like, well, we still have 3 stores to hit today. So you got 2 hours or whatever. This time, I think Rob was more like, okay, it's your choice. We can go to these 2 other stores that are ready, or you can stay here. So I liked that a lot better. It was more pressure in a different way, if that makes sense, because, wow, now this is really my choice if I'm going to stay here that has this, or I'm going to go to these other 2 avenues.
With maybe teasing it a little bit, but without giving too much away, is there a favorite moment that stands out in the series for both of you?
Oh yeah, but I don't know that I can say it.
Can't say it.
No, I mean every episode has a great moment, which is kind of the anchor of the episode leading up to it, and then letting it kind of riff and roll on after, and how that impacts the dominoes after. You know, interestingly, when I started editing it, I didn't start on episode 1. I started at essentially what is episode 5. So it's kind of like the midway of the series, and then the series worked backwards to kind of find that point. And I picked that moment in episode, what is now episode 5, because it was such a pivotal turn. I was like, okay, you know, the quest had started, and there was one of those moments like, wow, the quest is on. But now it's like, okay, the quest is on, and now it's starting to shape itself beyond our own intentions.
Oh, that's really cool. Jay, would you say that moment was as impactful for you? Not that it wouldn't be, but what I mean is was that kind of an anchor point or one of the standout moments, or do you have another one in your mind where you...
Jay might not know the episodes as well as I do as well. We sat and watched them all, like kind of back to back in the course of a day while doing other stuff and just talking about it. You know, Jay's a producer on this series. It's important that he looks at it. I need the objectivity. But I think it would be asking a lot of Jay to say, hey, what was your favorite moment in episode 6, you know, before the commercial break? Whereas I
don't know the exact episodes. Again, I've seen it one time all the way through. But I can say there's a lot of similarities between the first one, but there's also a lot of differences. I know I'm being super vague, but this one definitely has its own feel to it, which, again, when you're in the heat of the moment, I know I'm always worried about how interesting something is going to be, and Rob's like, don't worry about that, just worry about the game stuff. So I kind of have to let that go. But this one has got a really interesting flavor to it, and I don't know if it's better. I don't know. I love it, though. I think it's my favorite thing we've ever done. I'll say that.
That's awesome.
It's a good answer as we approach a Kickstarter launching August 22nd.
14 days, 13 episodes. How'd you land on 13 episodes?
It's just a round number for a series, right? You know, traditionally series are like 6, 10, 13. It's not like a day is an episode, because you've got to have all the build-up, of course, and explaining the quest, and you're also dealing with other things like discussion topics like the history and the origins of the N64. And similarly, the legacy of the 64, and we talk about GameCube as well, and we talk about what happens after the quest as well, when the kind of like the time runs out and where we're at and how that thing kind of unfolds. So like, don't try to equate 14 days, 13 episodes. It's kind of like, throw the days out of it. It's just like, here's 13 episodes that tells this whole story and how things move around it.
Got it. How many crew members did you have on this, and how does it compare to Nintendo Quest?
It's about the same amount. I feel maybe we had one less crew member because we weren't on the road as much, so I didn't feel like we needed as much support. But I felt like we have more camera angles. Nintendo Quest, we had 2 angles. This one we have 3, but I'm operating on this one as well. So to have a third angle really helped, I felt, at times. It also helps with the intensity. Just things change in 10 years about how you approach a subject and what you want to do. So it made it a little bit easier to have one less person on the crew on that side of things.
Got it. Well, this is exciting. We said it before. We're going to say it again. This Thursday is the launch of the Kickstarter. The time we're recording here, it's August 22nd. Tell me a little bit about what this Kickstarter is and how the release varies between this and eventually the series going to, will it be a streaming platform eventually?
Yeah, I mean, we're still exploring some of that. In Canada, it'll be on a specialty channel, which is a super channel. It's a premium add-on that you can watch through Amazon, like so many of the additional pay things. It's also going to be in Germany. None of that's going to come out until 2025 by the looks of it, because usually you need a couple months lead time. I'm not delivering until early November, and that's when our backers will get access. So our backers will have, you know, access 4 to 6 months ahead of everybody in the world, regardless of where you are in the world, which I think is, you know, the biggest incentive to get behind this. There's going to be tons of bonus features. We're doing a digital DVD and Blu-ray offering, of course, and we're trying to raise funds basically to offset legal, insurance, and even help with our audio costs. These are all super expensive components of making a professional series. Like you've said, this is not just like hunting out there, you know, hoping that we're getting it with a selfie stick. This is, you know, a full-on crew, and it just costs a lot of money.
I don't know how much we want to give away before the launch of the Kickstarter. I know that the page is kind of vague right now, does not have a lot of tiers, but do you want to promote some of what will be available since this will be launching pretty close to the Kickstarter?
Yeah.
Or what can you say?
I mean, I think the coolest thing for people to go after is your name in the credits. We've made that available in a couple different ways. Traditionally, you would have to buy a Blu-ray, like the most expensive Blu-ray, and then that comes with your name in the credit as kind of a scaling reward tier. Now Kickstarter allows add-ons as well, so we've just made it a blanket add-on. So if you just want your name in the credit of this, but you don't want to pay for shipping or the cost of physical goods, which we know is rising ever and ever and ever, maybe just get the digital copy of the series so you can watch it and then add on your name in the credit, or add on just a signed postcard from Jay and I. There's a lot of different things. One of the coolest things, I think, as an add-on, and there's only one, is this signed N64 by so many of the participants that we met on our way.
Wow.
It is unique to One of One. There is a second gold one behind me, but that is my trinket from the quest. But this could be anybody's if they get it, and there's only one, so I forget what we priced it at, but given that it's 1 of 1, it's not super cheap.
So it's not an auction item, it's an actual tier.
That's right.
With a set price.
Yeah, first come, first serve.
Wow. Okay. So people be refreshing on Thursday. Make sure that you get it right at launch. If you want a one-of-one unique item, that's something that is a piece of history. You've seen how Nintendo Quest has lasted for 10 years. People are still loving it, still buying the Blu-ray, still talking about it. This is another one, I'm sure, that's going to be a piece of video game history. So all this sounds great. Before I let you guys go, this has been great talking with you. What do you want to leave people with about this series? What is going to get them excited? They've been waiting 10 years for this thing, and what can they expect?
Go ahead, Jay. I'll let you have the first word.
I'll say that it's very important in terms of the history of the Nintendo 64. I think it's just as important as the NES. You're going to get a lot of great game hunting, a lot of stress on my part, a lot of tense moments. Overall, more importantly, it's for a good cause, and this is for my mom because she passed away from Alzheimer's and dementia. So it really feels like the weight of what we're doing here is just different. It's very important, and I think it's a beautiful story, and this is your chance to get physical. You know what I mean? You guys want a physical copy of it. We're all collectors, so digital is great. That's the way things are going. But this is your chance to get a hard copy that's yours forever, no matter what.
It's a wonderful adventure, right? Isn't that we all want? Unique places to explore, interesting people that you meet along the way, surrounded by the thing that you love across 13 episodes, and have it emblazoned on an amazing quality Blu-ray. It's the thing that we live for, right? I mean, anybody that likes Nintendo Quest will absolutely, I think, adore what we've done with this, and people are going to want to compare the two, but I think they both live and breathe in their own separate spaces, but they complement each other so well. So this is like a much evolved version of everything that people loved about Nintendo Quest. It's incredible game hunting stores, interesting people, awesome discussion topics on the more of the documentary side of things, and just unbelievable moments that you'll never be able to replicate. It could never possibly script. And like Jay said, all for an amazing cause that is going to change the quality of life for people, all done through the passion of gaming.
That sounds wonderful. And I want to tell people, if you're on the fence about getting physical media versus digital, I'm going to say this Blu-ray again, I mean, not being asked to plug it, but this Vinegar Syndrome, 10-year anniversary Blu-ray looks incredible, Rob. I cannot believe the quality of this. I own the movie on digital. I think I bought it through Amazon. I've seen it on YouTube in whatever 4K or 1080, whatever the highest quality is. And you pop this Blu-ray in, it's not a 4K, it's a Blu-ray, and it looks like it's a 4K. It's just, you guys did an incredible job with this.
We spent a lot of time on that. It's a 2-disc double 50 gig Blu-ray, which costs a lot more than the standard Vinegar Syndrome release. And again, I don't know how we've sold so many. I'm super thankful for that. I designed all the packaging with them, and I wanted it to be just perfect. A lot of people will just turn over the files and kind of just give a thumbs up or thumbs down to their version of that stuff. So we're doing our very, very best to, when we put something out there, it has all of our attention and all of our love in it.
Yeah, it's amazing. You guys did a great job. So I have no doubt that the release of Nintendo 64 Quest on physical is going to be great based on what they're doing here. So thank you guys. Everybody go support the Kickstarter Thursday, August 22nd. Refresh early. Get your hands on that one of one N64, the physical goodies, name in the credits. Thank you guys so much. I cannot wait to go on this quest with you guys.
It's going to be awesome. I appreciate you taking the time to talk about the ultimate 64-bit road trip, Nintendo 64 Quest. I know your game. I'm just curious to see how many of your listeners and viewers are as well.
Get ready for a spoiler. Won't say it twice, 'cause we already